So, last session of the day, so I'm really the real keynote. Everyone else has just been the warm-up act. That's been nice. We're going to talk about adding intelligence or AI or cognitive services to Unity applications. It's something we've been doing for a while, and I'm going to give you a bunch of resources to get going. For those that didn't read why you're in this room and who I am, I'm Neil. I've been working with N² for about 10 years. I worked with Microsoft very closely on a whole bunch of technologies, and we were very privileged to get early access to a whole bunch of technologies over the last 5 years, including HoloLens and including some of the cognitive services. I guess predominantly to provide feedback as people that typically we sit on what I like to call the hemorrhaging edge of technology. And so what are we actually going to look at today? We're going to look at translation, so using machine learning algorithms to translate, language understanding, and this is probably the most used and interesting aspect for, I would say certainly for mixed reality, but for VR, AR type environments where if you came to Rocky's session, you would have heard him talking about voice activation. But there's a number of other environments where you really don't have a huge amount of control set. You know, even when you've got a game controller, it's not a vast amount of control. And to be able to use voice control within your application to understand the intention of the customer is very powerful. And then we're going to look at vision and how you can use cameras within your application to capture what is around you and do something with it. And then we're going to extend that out into doing facial recognition. So maybe a good place to start is actually to show you some demos of stuff working, and then we'll talk about how they actually work. So these are all super simple Unity applications. I've done nothing to make the Unity bit look super cool, because I want to talk about the focus is on how we plug the application in, and then you can do all the magical, wonderful experience stuff yourself, because hopefully you're experts at that. So this first application does translation. So obviously it uses the microphone, and it's listening right now. Hello. The sun does not move. So this is converting it to Italian. And it's using a cloud service, and it's actually trying to recognize me the whole time and listening in the background, and you can see it's picking up things as we go. Now what's interesting about this is that potentially you want to build something that can understand things in different languages or can work in different languages. This is a starting point for doing that, and it's actually very little amount of code, and I'll dig into that in a minute. The next step to this, let's see, what do I want to do next, is this. So once you've got something that can translate or receive input, voice input, wouldn't it be cool to be able to understand the intention of commands that your customer is giving to your application? And this uses a technology called LUIS, or Language Understanding Intelligence Service, that Microsoft hosts for you, but you can train it to do things or understand specific intentions. And so we're going to look at this. I'll just do a quick demo, and then we'll dig into the code again as we get further down. Turn the cube green. Make the globe bigger. I would like a yellow cylinder. Enlarge the cylinder. Shrink the cube. So you can see what's happening here is that I've got two intentions. One is about size of the object, and one is about color of the object. But I was using lots of different phrases to command it. I wasn't using the same set of keywords or the same set of phrases. And what I've done is built a machine learning algorithm that understands the intention of my commands and obviously of the customer's commands. And I'll show you how actually really easy it is to build this. The hard thing is tuning it. The first step of building it is quite easy. So let's just go through the demos and then we can get into the interesting bit. So this one is a vision system. I need a bit of a, let's see if this is going to work. So I need something to hold up in front of the camera. Oh, I switched off the... Okay, so it saw a person, a man, it saw we were indoors, it saw a bottle and a beverage. And it gives me confidence levels. So with the vision system, and this is out of the box, I did no training for this. So it's giving me some understanding at a very high level of what is being seen by the camera. And I just triggered the camera with a space bar, but of course if you're in an AR or VR type situation, you might want to use a gesture or a command. So you can start to see how some of these things can come together quite nicely. And for the final demo, and then we'll start digging into code and services, we're going to do some facial recognition, and I've trained it on my face, my beautiful mug, and see if it's going to recognize, yeah, it recognizes that it was me that it was looking at. So these things are all very, very simple to build. And actually all 4 of these demos I built in one day. And I'll show you how you can do it. And actually Stefano, who's at the front that I work with, has built a whole bunch of documentation. I don't want to embarrass him, but I just did, so bad luck. Has built a whole bunch of documentation that's online that shows you step by step how you can do this yourself. So the first place you really want to start is the portal. And the Azure portal gives you a whole bunch of services that you can start playing with for free. If you're not going to have high transaction volumes and you're just really trying to get stuff working, you can get a bunch of stuff working for free. So yes, a lot of the time when you create an account, it asks you for a credit card, but I'll guarantee you your bill will be 0 unless you're doing something crazy, right? So all of these services that I've got running here, these 4 services that I set up for this demo, totally free. So let's start with the translation service. So in order to create a new service, I guess I should maybe explain a little bit. How many people have played with Azure services before? Nearly half, so half haven't. So I'll just very quickly explain a couple of things. So the first thing you should know about is resource groups. Resource groups are really logical ways of grouping things together. And so I grouped everything. If you see, I have a whole bunch of resource groups here, but I grouped everything for these demos into, here we go, Neil's Unite Demos October. Okay, so in here, I've got the services that I set up for this set of demos. And so it's a nice way of grouping them. Also makes it very, very easy for me when I finish this demo this afternoon to delete that whole resource group and everything's gone, right? Which limits my total cost, of course, because no one can now start using these and start charging me money in my company, because this is a shared portal for everyone in our organization. So let's go and have a look at the translation one. So in order to create the translation one, you literally just go and create a resource. You can type in translation. Oh. And you can see there's a couple of, so I was doing text translation, and you could create one straight from there. But I don't want to do that. I want to go back to the one that I've already created. Oh, okay, you're going to play like that. I'll just go back to my dashboard. And there it is. So once you've created it, it's up and running. And that's pretty much all you need to do except grab a set of keys. And so it will give you a set of private keys that attach your code to this service. So let's have a look at the code. Let's go back to the translator, wherever it was. I guess, yeah, something I should point out is that I'm using 2017.4. I want to stay on the ones that have long-term service or support because, well, lots of reasons actually, but predominantly because it's the version that we can, with both from N squared and from Microsoft perspective, provide support for ourselves. When things are changing rapidly, it's much harder for us to say, yeah, we'll definitely support that. And so we're staying on the LTS versions for the moment. So let's have a look at some of the scripts. And actually, the microphone manager just picks up what I'm saying in the microphone, not massive. The results just maps or binds the results to the content that's shown on the screen. So the interesting bit is in here, is in the translator code. And when you see how simple it is, you'll probably go, oh, I should just go and have a beer now. Because it really is super, super simple. So what we're doing here is we're using the Unity dictation to get the text that's being said. And then we make a web request passing in the token, and that token is the key that I got from Azure as my authorization. And we make a web request to an endpoint with some parameters, and those parameters are the language that you want to go from and the language you want to go to. And it's pretty much that simple. So then you send that web request, you get, hopefully, a good result that you can pass out, and then we set that result into the translated result that we saw on the bottom. So it really is very little code once you know what the code is to get this up and running. So that's fairly simple, and there's a whole bunch. I don't know how many languages there are in Microsoft's translation system now, 60-something, including Klingon, which is super important in case they ever come. So, you know, that you can go and just get up and running with all the major languages in the world and have translation capability within your application pretty quickly. And so, you know, one of the things we were talking about prototyping was, wouldn't it be cool to have like a HoloLens app or an AR app that someone you could talk to in a foreign language and you would just start seeing what they're saying straight away, and you could talk back and they would see what you're saying. And that would be very, very easy to build now using a system like this. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is Lewis. Now this is a little bit more complicated. So let's just go back and have a look at Lewis. So this was the language understanding where I gave some commands and it understood my intention. Now once again you get keys, and the call is very similar, right? So you make an HTTP call and it gives you a result. But how do you train it? How do you make it work? Well, there's a Lewis portal. So let's go in there. It'll probably ask me to log in, and then I'll have to do a little dance for you. Yeah. And I'll show you. Yeah, thank you. Is this actually going to work? Wow. So in the portal, in the Lewis portal, you set up a, well, here we've got this. This is the service that I created for this demo. And within a service, you have a number of intents. Those are the intentions you want to train for. So I have an intent to change the object color, an intent to change the object size, and importantly, I also have none. That's an intent I don't understand and I want to discard. And you have to train for that as well, because everything that is said that you don't care about, you mark as none. So as you're training it, things that maybe sound similar but are not quite what you want, you mark them as none, and then they don't get put into the category incorrectly and you don't get the wrong result. So intents are important. You create an intent. An intent is made up of entities. So within an intent, there can be one, or there can be zero, but there can be more than one as well entities. So the entities that we have for changing size and changing color, well, changing color, we need to know the color. That's an entity. We need to know the object that we want to change the size of. That's the target. And in fact, if you've got a game or an application where you can move around and look at things, the target could be it. The target could be make this green, because it could be the thing you're looking at. And so the intention is make the thing I'm looking at green. And then you could use a combination of knowing where the player is, what the player is looking at, and make that the target. And then are they looking to increase the size, decrease the size, or change the color? And so you can see these entities here: downsize, upsize, increase, decrease size, and change color. And they map to the intents. And then you train it by creating utterances. An utterance, and here's some examples of utterances. In fact, let me change these so that we see what they were actually said. So, I would like to yellow cylinder. Well, it doesn't make sense, but I understand the intention that they want the cylinder to be yellow. Make the globe bigger. Well, that does actually make sense as a sentence, but it also has an intention. And what's the last one? Turn the cube green. And that has, and then you can see that the system has actually automatically tried to convert those into entities. And it's done a pretty good job because I've trained it so far. And these are new utterances that it's realized it's not quite sure about, and it wants my, as the trainer, confirmation. So I'll see here that it thinks this one is a color one. Yep, that's correct. So I can tick it and say, yes, use that for training. It says this one is a size one. That's correct. I'll tick it and use it for training. This one, hopefully it thinks is a color one as well. Yep. And I'll tick that and use it for training. Now you'll notice as I started ticking these, this train went from green to red. Red means there's now new information to train against. And I could try loading more, I doubt there is more, but as people use your application or use your game, it starts collecting what is being said for you to modify the training over time. Now this means you can ship a game, you can ship a Unity app, you can ship your application using language understanding, and over time it can actually improve because you can keep coming back here every day, every week, however often you want, and retrain based on what is being asked of it and improve it. So let me train this. And when you train it, it's basically building a new machine learning model on the utterances that we've given it. So that's pretty cool. Didn't have to know any data science for that. Really didn't have to be an academic at all. The only thing I have to remember, and that requires a little bit of intelligence, is to actually publish it. Because if you don't publish it, you don't get it. So you can train 1,000 models. If you don't publish them, they're useless. So you have to publish. When you publish it, it gives you an endpoint. And we can have a look at the endpoints. And you can see there's my key, and there's an endpoint. And that's the endpoint that I make calls to in my application with the string that I want to try and understand the intention behind. And it will return giving me the intent and any entities it's picked up. And then I can convert those into an action in my software. So let's have a quick look at that. I'm very aware that you're probably already thinking, God, is it time for beer, yeah? So here's this application. Here's my Lewis manager. Let's load that up. And we'll have a look and see what it's doing here. So I make my web request, and I'm going to get out some kind of query, and it comes back as JSON. So if you're used to using JSON format, pretty straightforward. So here I can now start looking through the entities and start building up a dictionary of entity data, and then I can determine on the intent. And you'll see here that you can actually get a list of potential intents with a score. So you would have noticed in the vision it had confidence levels. Everything in AI is based on confidence. There's nothing that's 100%. If it is, you're overtrained on one thing and nothing else will work. So that's something to look out for. Everything is percentage of confidence. And so what I'm doing here is I'm assuming the top scoring intention is the right one. And if it's change object color, then I try and find out what the target and the color is, and then I can change it in a behavior that I've created. Or if it's change object size, I can look for the target and I can see is it upsize or downsize, where do they want to go, and then I can go ahead and change that in my scene. So as you can see, it's not really rocket science to build a lot of these things. So let's have a look at the next one. The next one was vision, and now you're probably thinking, wow, that's got to be super hard. Well, actually, it's almost as easy as translation. The basic vision one is almost as easy as translation. So you create a new computer vision service. Done. Get a set of keys, use the endpoint and the keys, and you get a result. And that result is what you display. And so there's a basic set of predefined content that it's looking for that's already trained. So that set that I showed up there with the bottle, it sees a beverage, a bottle, a man, indoors, person. That's predefined set. So if you only care about like kind of basic objects, you can just start using the computer vision API as it is. And it just works. It gives you, and you'll see, let's have a look at again. Let's bring up the code. Which one was it? This one. Vision Manager. I keep drinking Diet Coke while I'm looking at code because every bottle has 1,000 lines of code in it. I probably should have charged Coke for that promotion. So again, it gives you a JSON response. So you make that web request, you get a JSON response, and you can start looking through that JSON response for a bunch of tag data. And what we're doing in this demo is really just displaying that tag data as raw data. But then you could start taking actions on it. So if you see a person in the scene, do something. If you don't see a person in the scene, do something. If you think you're indoors or outdoors, change the behavior. These are things that are very doable now with vision. So you can take a snapshot of what the camera is seeing, whether the camera is head mounted or the camera is on a device, and then you can make determinations of the behavior of your application based on some of these high-level things that you're seeing. So the next question is, of course, how do I train this further for specific objects? If you're, I don't know, you're a train enthusiast and you want to know the difference between, you know, a diesel D79 and a, I'm making this up by the way, and some other kind of train, then, you know, you might want to train on trains. What? Okay. Didn't go down well, never mind. Definitely beer required. So you can start building and changing the model and customizing. And so nearly every service that Microsoft has, they give you a baseline of a basic service to start working with, and then you can start adding your own custom data. So you're essentially forking the model at that point and starting to create your own model based on their base model, and you're building on top of that with your trained data. And so there's a custom vision library that you can start plugging into and defining your own stuff. Now the next piece of the puzzle, the next demo I showed you was the Face API. Now that in some regard is a customized vision API, but it's very customized to recognizing faces. And you know, we do it every day in some magical way. We seem to be able to recognize people by their faces, right? If I fly to New York and knock on my brother's door, he doesn't open the door and say, well, how do I know it's you? Can I see some ID? I have 3 forms of ID at least. No, of course, he recognizes my face straight away. It's some magical thing that we have as human beings, and yet computers find it quite hard to do. So this is a model that's been specifically trained for recognizing faces and trying to differentiate between different faces. The free version gives you a certain number of calls and a certain number of faces you can train against. If you want to extend that out, then you need to start paying, of course. But to play around with it and get going, again, you can use the free version. You get actually some other interesting things with Face API, like it gives you an understanding of emotion. So it will say this face looks happy, or this face looks sad. Happy and sad are kind of the easy ones to get roughly right. The harder ones to do are those kind of like angry, disappointed, and they do try and categorize on those, but I would say the happy and sad ones, the confidence levels are pretty good. The other ones are probably a little harder, and probably cultural too, right? Some people look surprised, and at the same time, that same face they use for anger, so it's hard to know. But again, once you've got the keys, you can start building out. Now, the other thing which I'm not going to dig into, because really these sessions are quite short, but is how you train the Face API. And there's a whole bunch of APIs to do that. And the resources I'm going to give you a little tool that you can download to start training the Face API against a set of faces, it's a little Windows app, but if you want to run it on a different platform, you can pull the code down. It's all in GitHub. Everything I'm showing you, by the way, is all documented, all in GitHub, all available for you to start playing with. But that gives you the ability then to, if we go back to the face analysis. Now, if you're doing this on most platforms now, you need to remember that you need to request permission. The app needs to request permission to use the camera, use the microphone, those kind of access things. So I would say probably one of the highest level of support, emails or questions we get is, oh, it's not working. I've run the app and I don't get any results. It's probably because you haven't switched on capabilities, whether it's a Windows app or an iPhone app or whatever. You have to switch on the permission capabilities to use the camera or use the microphone, and then it has to actually request that from the customer, that they say, yes, this app can use those capabilities. So things to know about with the Face API, the first thing is you create groups of people. So you need to create a person group, and then you put people's faces in that group and train against them. So you'll notice here I'm kind of converting that into a data set that I can then use. And that data set really maps to the JSON that it sends back when it gives me a recognition result. So here I've got my endpoint for my face. I've got my secret key, which I will delete as soon as this event is over. But yeah, you create your own, you get it from the service. And then I'm really just creating a label and adding text to it based on what I get from the Face API. Now, this is a little more complicated. We're setting a bunch of headers up to get the information back. And then it's giving us this face object, which is JSON. We're just converting the JSON back into a face object so that we can list out the faces that we see. And so the other thing to be aware of is the Face API can actually see multiple faces within one snapshot. So if 4 of us that it knows about are standing in front of a camera, it'll try and capture all 4 and give us the list of people that it sees, which is pretty cool too. So if you're working with a known set of people, you can start building a multi-user type environment or application that this can plug into. And of course now there's a lot of other devices, and I don't know if any of you are building cool things using stuff like RealSense or the Orbit camera, but there's a bunch of these other devices that are out there that people are building games for, like Kinect used to be. I probably shouldn't say that, but yeah, it's sad, right? I thought it was a great product. I built some cool things for it as well. But yeah, there's a ton of these kind of things out there, so it doesn't have to be a headset. It doesn't have to be a mobile app. There's lots of other opportunities where you can capture multiple faces in an environment. So that's pretty cool. So I've been given the 10-minute warning, so I need to get back to slides. Hello? No? There we go. So obviously the portal is the place you go to get started with Azure. That gets you up and running. We have a ton of resources, and actually, we kind of have tried to combine them all. There's a site called TeachMeMR, and teachmemr.com then links to a whole bunch of these other resources. So we've been building an online learning course, there's a LinkedIn course, there's an ebook. If you go to the Academy, let's just close this. Go. So you'll see everything that I've been talking about is actually the level 300 labs 1 to 4. So language understanding, this is a hands-on lab, step by step, take you through how to build what I just showed you. Computer vision, step by step. This is custom vision that I was talking about customizing. The Lewis language understanding, step-by-step guide, and face recognition. And then there's a whole bunch more if you want to go further. In fact, if you want to go as far as building your own machine learning algorithm, which could do some interesting things, there's a guide for showing you how to do that. Richer object detection. Oh, I don't need to show you. Oh yeah, this machine learning sample predicts what you should put on your virtual shelf in your virtual store based on the time of year. But yes, there's a whole bunch of pretty good resources up there. So I really recommend that you, if you want to get stuck into this, you can go through them. And actually, let's just have a quick look at one so you get an idea. Oh, there's Charlie. And you can go through and you can see step by step how you get started, what buttons you need to push, how you create the service, and then how you get into starting with Unity. Oh, well, this is the training app, Person Maker, and then how you set up the Unity project so that it works. And again, step by step, how to go through this to get it up and running for you in Unity. So I thoroughly recommend if you want to get going, you have a look at that. So that's where we were. So at the end, I guess I've given you a kind of roller coaster ride very fast through 4 simple to use services that will get you up and running and get you started. You can see there's a whole bunch more there, right? So this is really the beginning if you haven't done any of this kind of stuff before. But don't be scared. Don't think this is like for rocket scientists or data scientists or you need a PhD to do this. It really is very, very straightforward to get going. And then you can start digging in deeper and start getting more interested in the science behind it and the training behind it. But you can get some pretty cool things up and running pretty quickly without having to know too much about the engine that's driving it from behind.